Fourth Republic, Yehun Rollins, Yehun Kufuor, Yehun Professor Mills, Wa Yehuda, Abediman Penny, Yehun Nanda Nebuchadnezzar, and the Ohuina. It sounds like Yanti Bibi Fufrubia. I say Yehuna Yasanko Diachri, the Yatida, what can I say? Then Pana ya at the Fufra, who second coming, no. Thank
you very much.
Oh, try answer Chikewu, last one, so. Pacho waka say, what be move for no? Ubia and talk Ghana Japade. Now, one horses here on what tono. Obey one day. Now, if banks today good. Uba what they want license and a bema one answer won't farm my own. But I say.
And one was whether we intend to provide a world-class sports stadium. It says that we don't have a world-class standard sports stadium. We've been to several countries. We've gone to watch matches. I've been to Wembley before, and it's a stadium of a different class from what we have here. And often countries are energized to build this stadia if you bid to host something. It creates the opportunity because you know that you get returns on the investment when the tournament comes to your country. And so I remember when we bid for the African Cup of Nations, some rehabilitation of stadia took place, but we didn't see any news, a world-class stadium built. In the current crisis in which we are, I would not stand here and promise that we will build a new stadium, but I've said that under the big push, we intend to spend a certain amount of money over 5 years on providing a good infrastructure to include roads, bridges, agro-industrial parks, and so on and so forth. That could include sports facilities. And if we make allocation, then we probably would look at providing such a stadium. And so that's what I can say. Sports, if you go to many countries, sports plays a very good part in the 24-hour economy. And so you find games being played at night under floodlights and so on and so forth. Unfortunately, here in many places, we have to close the match before the sun goes down. Otherwise, there's not enough light to continue the match because we can't even keep the floodlights on. And so I do think that as part of the 24-hour economy, sports can play a very good part, and we'll invest in sports facilities and help the people engaged, the private sector engaged in sports facilities to be able to provide, service at night so that our people can enjoy that service. During the working day, people go to work and things. In the evening, they want to go witness a football match or go witness an athletics meet. And we don't have exactly the facilities to sustain that. And so it's something that we will think about. Minyanu bisa say, "Ede importi ena eye bibi fofora. Yebetimi ede ensa atoso say we adia ebetimi assistant nyoma ama ye shebre Ghana for shebre assistant. Na em say enyoma bebre amaka no. Makacho said the central plank of your economic policy initially is to stabilize the economy and only the priority because we be tokromo ayakoshe no e was say yetimi eye na yetimi epie free tokrono ansa na waka bibia ka ho and America said 24-hour economy no and no ebie economy no se ne be ya enkwada no benye adwuma ye ye mabunu no benye adwuma ye because national security aka say the major threat to your stability in Ghana is youth unemployment. Abraham Miwabemu, now unemployment rate a little over 8%, and net unemployment could do 14.7%. And we share Ghana statistical standards, Ghana statistical service on more reports now. HSS things will deteriorate further because World Bank say 800,000 people have fallen below the poverty line. just because of economic crisis are here from we. Another Ghana Statistical Service report say 8 million of our people ended that back because they couldn't afford to eat. 8 million people did not eat for one day because they couldn't afford food. The major emergency I work on is food inflation ever from. And the only way we can do is say yan kasa eduane a yedi no e wo say yan kasa yedua wo ha na yetwa na yenkrofo timi nya food at affordable cost. Enti saa nyoma ni na ade a metimi aka say yebe ya ebe ma nyoma asesa amayen. Na osan bisa say yaba nyoma enkrofo afa anase omawia che say eye oman na japade a omonkwa omo afa no ye be en den say makan wo bebi bebre na nu ya me kola na lafo no omusu because o masasi bebre a abanje ye say e de ye bibi ene maye mo adwen say mo mfa nye biom na emra ne kire say wo se wo mfa nye wo mfa asase ne nye ade a wo gi ye ni nti wonfa nye bioma e wo se uma asase no esan kọ nia ode asase no ma o ene ye ka say la wireless me ka say President Kufuor FAB 40% EDC African Union Village because na ye be ye African Union Summit o ha enti na ka 60% of la wireless land ene ko hokohwe ya che asase nafa without consultation with the stakeholders. Make I say Abra Professor Mills by International Students Hostel near Chedi in Afa. Professor Mills by or just assassin back and a honor foreign ministry. AC assassin also na foreign ministry. Ain't he say wafa abaya japadie ewo kwan so a emrano empenia yebe san a repossess on behalf of the people of Ghana. And I know a commitment I just say may atremo. Will I still give amnesty to people convicted for Galamsey? And my answer is yes. Because those who are in prison for Galamsey are not the actual perpetrators of Galamsey. The big kingpins are not in prison. Those who are in prison are the small boys that they employ to work on their Galamsey concessions. And so they are victims of circumstances. And so if we are coming with a new fight against Galamsey, let's start by giving them amnesty, let's bring them out, reform them, and do the things that will make them not go and do what they've done again. If somebody must be in prison, it's those district chief executives and ministers and others who are doing the Galamsey, not the people they are employing. The term of Bank of Ghana governor used to overlap the political season. It's a 4-year contract, but it depends on when the governor is appointed. And so if you remember, the last governor who was the governor in my time was Governor Isaku Nashiru. When I left office, Nashiru's term was still running. It was the same with Governor Akwa. His term overlapped government. It is only when Nashiru was forced to resign and a new governor was appointed that the term is becoming conterminous with the political season. But otherwise, really, it just says you have a 4-year contract. After 4 years, the contract is renewable. And so if a government comes into office and your contract has not expired, you continue as governor. And when the time comes and your contract is over, depending on your performance, your contract will be renewed. But if you are a governor who presided over a 60 billion loss, I wonder if you expect a contract extension. If you're a governor who printed 42 billion CDs and pumped it into the economy, pushed inflation to 54%, I wonder if you expect that you will get a contract extension. If you're a governor who in crisis decides that the best thing for a bank to do is to invest $250 million in a headquarters building, I don't know if you should have the expectation that your contract will be extended. And so I think that yes, 4-year contract, but it must be based on the performance of the person or the individual who is in that office. Cabinet reshuffles are important because they enable you to bring fresh pair of hands into your government. And then somebody might not be performing in a certain sector, but if you reshuffle him and move him to another sector, you find that he finds his feet and performs better. So from time to time, a president might look at his cabinet and shift people around or drop some people and bring new people in. It is something that happens all over the world. We were advocating for the reshuffling of the finance minister because from as far back as 2019, we could predict what was going to happen. A finance minister comes into office and all he knows is to borrow on the international capital markets. And not only because that's all he knows, but also he benefits from the borrowing. Conflict of interest. His company, Data Bank, anytime government borrowed, received commissions on the borrowing. And so that was an incentive to borrow. So is it any surprise that in 6 years, this finance minister borrowed $13.5 billion from the Eurobond market? With all the projects and infrastructure I invested in my time in office, the total amount I borrowed from the Eurobond market in the 4 years was $3.5 billion. In 6 years, this minister had borrowed $13.5 billion. And that is what has put us in the situation in which we are. And if even that money had been put into productive use and infrastructure, we will not be sitting here and lamenting about this country. But most of that money went into consumption and into dubious projects that have brought no return to this country. And so if the president had reshuffled him earlier, we will not be in this mess that we are. MPP has very capable people. The only reason the president kept him in that office and refused to shuffle him is because he was his cousin. So you ask me, why haven't I congratulated the president for reshuffling the minister? The distraction has been done. In English they say it's bolting the stable after the horses have escaped. When the man has finished kaputting the economy, you then remove him and then you say, I should clap for you. I won't clap. I won't applaud him. He should have done that much earlier. Oforiatta should have been out of that office in 2019, not at the time that he made him leave. And so I think that's my comment on that. Increasing districts. That is part of the expenditure government has to bear. Bernard, unfortunately, it is provided for in the Constitution, and unfortunately, it has been misused by governments. A lot of the time, the motivation for splitting districts is to create additional constituencies. And so you find that districts have been split and become unviable because they are too small and do not have economic opportunity to be able to be viable as a district. There are many districts today whose only source of income is District Assembly's Common Fund. And so unfortunately that is what has happened. I remember when I was a deputy minister, the districts were under 100, about 90 districts or 70 districts or something like that. Today we have 261. And there's no scientific basis for the division except gerrymandering. Because there are districts that are bigger that should have been divided, that are not divided. But districts that are smaller that should have been left as they are, have been split and created into smaller districts. Because then the party that wins in that district can have 2 constituencies instead of 1. So that is the case. Several districts that existed constituencies that existed have been converted into districts. So in looking at the review of the Constitution, we must set some more stringent guidelines for the creation of districts. You know that now every traditional area wants a district. And so we're getting to the stage where every paramount chief wants his traditional area to be a district. Because I go around and traditional paramount chiefs are requesting districts for their traditional areas. That's not what it was meant to be. But if you look in the Constitution, the creation of regions is specified, and you must go through a process that requires consensus building. Unfortunately, it's not the same with districts. With regions, you must have a commission of inquiry, and the commission of inquiry must recommend, and when it has recommended, it must go for a referendum. 40% of the people in that region must vote, and 75% of them must say yes. And so, if we do the constitutional review, we probably must look at making more stringent the creation of more districts. Because if we say it's just based on population and land size, where are we going to stop? Ghana today is 33 million people. It is predicted that by 2050 or 2030 something, we'll be 50 million people. And so if you say population is the driver, then by the time we are 50 million people, we'll have 600 districts. And our children's children will benefit from the establishment of a new city like that. Will you review the IMF policy? We will not cancel the IMF policy. It is a policy that our government has signed on to, and they signed on behalf of government of Ghana. Indeed, when the crisis was reaching epic proportions, we actually asked them to go to the IMF for support, because this economy was going to crash. And it would have crashed with severe consequences. And you remember, we will not go to the IMF. We will not go to the IMF today, tomorrow, or as long as we remain in power. We will not go to the IMF. We will not go to the IMF. Eventually, we told them that if you don't go to the IMF walking, you will go in an ambulance. And they ended up there in an ambulance. And so the conditionalities are more stringent than if we had gone earlier. And so, yes, we've landed in the IMF. We will work with the IMF. There are opportunities in the agreement for tweaking the agreement in some ways, not cancelling it. And so, as a new government that comes, we will immediately have to sit with the IMF, look at the conditionalities that we're giving, and see how we can tweak them to suit our present circumstances. Things are clearer now, because at the time they signed the IMF agreement, the debt restructuring had not been concluded. Today, it has been concluded, even with the international bondholders. And so we have a more predictable trajectory about how our loans are going to have to be repaid. Even this year, we're supposed to pay $400 and something million of the debt. I don't know where government is going to get that money. We probably will use some of the money the IMF themselves are giving us to pay for it. And that will create problems for the city, because we don't have the kind of injection of foreign currency that we should have. I'm committed to the affirmative action bill. The last time I met with the Speaker, I urged him to make sure that he passes it in his term as Speaker, and that the women of Ghana will be very grateful to him if he's able to pass the affirmative action bill before the life of this Parliament ends. Historically, it's one of the bills that has lasted the longest under consideration. And I think that the time has come for us to have an affirmative action bill. That one and the amendment to the Citizens Bill to allow our dual citizens to participate even in a greater way in the administration of this country. And so that bill too should be passed. The dual citizens should be amended to allow dual citizens to be able to participate. Those two bills are pending before Parliament, and I urge the Speaker to make sure that he passes them before the life of this Parliament ends. General elections, yes, I remember under Charlotte Osei, she announced that their website had been hacked, and so they should continue compiling the ballots with the manual system. And that's why we have a manual system and we have an electronic system. The electronic system makes tallying faster, but it does, even though it goes ahead and makes it faster, the manual system must also conclude before the elections are declared, because eventually the pink sheets are the name of the game. And so in 2016 and 2020, I wouldn't blame the Electoral Commission completely, because the electoral process affords us certain instruments and levers to be able to police the poll. And I must say that, unfortunately, our preparation in terms of using the processes the electoral process affords us to police the poll were not effectively used. I can tell you we've learned the lessons from that time. And this time, it is going to be close marking. We're going to put the right people at the polling stations. And for those of you who are NDC supporters, we're asking for volunteers. We want to know which polling station you are voting in. We'll train you. And on that day, you sit there for us. So those of you media people who are NDC supporters, I beg you, give us your names. In the morning, you won't go and vote and go away. You vote and sit at your polling station. We would have trained you, and you'll be our agent there to make sure that the right thing is done. We're going to man the collation centers. We have trained our people who are going to man the collation centers. They will be there. In some cases, in 2020, agents in the collation center went and they said, oh, the returning officers have not come yet. So you go home and go and eat and rest and come early in the morning. By the time they came early in the morning, the result had been declared. And of course, it led to confusion. And you remember that some people were killed by that incident. And so we are going to take advantage of the levers that the electoral process offers us to be able to police the poll. So I can assure every Ghanaian voter who votes for the NDC that your vote will be protected. I can assure you of that. Ho Airport is currently not functional, but it still gives us the opportunity for medical evacuations and emergency flights. And so several times I've seen the Air Force, land there for one reason or the other. Unfortunately, Passion Air started flights into Ho, but the demand was sluggish, and I'm told that on one flight they had only a single passenger. And so it was not sustainable at the time. But I don't think we should give up. I think that commercial flights will resume to Ho if people see that time is precious. And instead of driving that length of time, 3 hours to Volta region, you probably are better off just flying 20 minutes and arriving on time. And so I do think some things can be done. But I also know that a group is intending to set up a pilot training school at the Ho Airport of international standard and bring student pilots from all over Africa and Ghanaian students to train as pilots. That would be a useful use of the airport. There are many ancillary activities that we can do, like aircraft maintenance. We can put aircraft hangars there so that aircrafts that need maintenance can come there and maintain. And so it will still be a useful facility, and we will encourage the private sector to make use of it. After all, we built the facility, and so we just have to encourage and entice the private sector to take advantage of it. And the final question was on Adar Songo Lagoon. I don't know the processes that were used for the award of that concession, but I think that is something worth looking at. I know that there was resistance from the people, and a journalist in the local media station was brutalized and harassed, and I hear he eventually died. And so it's something that we should look at. What processes were used? What is the effect of on the livelihoods of the people? Because that has been a very controversial issue. I remember that there was a company before, Vacuum Salt, that did the same thing. There were run-ins with the people, and eventually the PNDC had to come in and streamline things. So I really don't know what has happened in this case, but of course if we come, we'll take a look at it and see what amelioration is possible in that regard. When I spoke about taxes, I was told that I was not very clear. There are some nuisance taxes. I thought that when I mentioned COVID levy, you would all have assumed that I said we'll take the COVID levy off. We are the only country that is still punishing our people for a pandemic that has passed. And so I think that there are other revenue sources that we can use other than the COVID levy. Aside from that e-levy, with all the noise that was made, the revenue that is coming in is 1 billion cedis. And why would you punish people who want to use electronic means of payment only to bring in 1 billion cedis and prevent them from doing so? And it hasn't brought in the required cash because Ghanaians are cashing out. Because why should I go and use Momo to pay? I pay a 1% transaction fee, then I pay another 1.5% COVID levy. So I pay 2.5%. But my colleague who uses cash to pay does not pay any tax. And so I'll also cash out the money from my Momo wallet and I'll go and buy what I want. And that is why e-levy is not performing. And so if we want people to use more cashless transactions, and I think that we must build a target for ending collecting of cash. You know, all government payments must be cashless, using electronic forms of payment. And if we're able to do that and take the punitive taxes off, I think more people would use it. And so I've said already that we'll abolish e-levy. So that's something that we intend to do. And so the nuisance taxes, we will take them off. And apart from that, like I said, we'll streamline the taxes and we'll make sure that we're able to spread the tax net. We've always talked about it, but this is the time for us to take action. The other time I was wondering, I have a house, people come and service my air conditioners. If there's an electrical fault, somebody comes and repairs it. A plumber comes if there's a fault with the plumbing system and all that. And it's a cash economy. I pay them with cash. And I wonder, who takes tax from all these people? All these workmen, all these artisans? At least they must pay a small percentage of that so that they also are bearing the burden of the tax net. And so if we can find instruments to be able to reach those people, probably pass legislation that makes it compulsory that if somebody like that comes to work, he must be registered as a qualified plumber or as a qualified electrician. And to be registered, you must have an electronic payment handle, either a POS or a mobile money system. You must have a means where if you pay him, a small percentage of it goes into the tax net. That will bring more people into the tax net. But these are ideas that we are still distilling, and the details of it will be in our manifesto when we launch in August. You will see the meat and the issues that are captured in that manifesto.